Welcome to the very first of the New Agreements podcasts, a very exciting series where I get to talk to unique leaders in different parts of life and society that will get to tell and talk a bit about their backstory, but also tell us what they think going forward in the future, the new agreement we should have with ourselves, with our people who are living in our homes with us, how we do our spending, or even in how we structure society at large. This first New Agreements episode is with Larry Sanger, the co-founder of Wikipedia. He's a very smart guy. We did it over Zoom because he's out on the west coast of America. So we're still improving the production and the quality. Josh Price is doing a great job trying to pull it all together. But I really enjoyed this conversation. It's a long one. It's the best part of 2 hours. And it really is a game of two halves. You've got to watch it or listen to it to know what I mean. It's just very interesting thinking about how people can have similar views and different views depending on what part of life we're talking about. I won't say much more than that. Just have a listen. Welcome, Larry, to the New Agreements podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for making time again. I guess the last time, or the first time we met was in May in Holland at the Next Web, and we got to do a 30-minute quick dive there. But hopefully we'll, on our own terms, we'll have a little bit more time to dive into your background and what you're up to and what's coming next, which is very exciting. And maybe we can explore some new ideas as well, if that's good with you.
Let's do it.
Why don't you just start by giving us your backstory? I remember before you talked about Alaska, and we connected over the love of huts. But why don't you fill us in with your backstory a little bit?
Sure. Well, I was born in the Washington state, in the state of Washington, in the Seattle area, and we moved up to Alaska when I was 7. And so most of my childhood memories growing up are from there. My dad took us kids, fishing and hiking and camping quite a bit. Like I would say, at least once a month during the spring through fall, and skiing in the winter. That was fun. And, I went to one of the better public schools in Anchorage, Alaska. Went to Reed College, which was very liberal, but also very open-minded. I myself am more a libertarian or conservatarian. But I got along pretty well, I think, with people reasonably. Decided I wanted to be a professor of philosophy. So I ended up going to Ohio State and getting my PhD. I actually got my PhD in 2000, just a few months after I had started working on Newpedia, which was, the predecessor of Wikipedia. And so that's the early story, I guess.
And out of interest, do you live in a city now, or do you live out in the sticks somewhere?
I live in an exurb, you could call it. I live sort of in between Pickerington and Canal Winchester, Ohio, about 25 minutes from Columbus. So the middle of Ohio.
I'm just always intrigued by people that grow up in the wild. And
I didn't grow up in the wild. I grew up surrounded by the wild. I grew up in a middle class neighborhood, very similar to a lot of middle class neighborhoods around the United States. It was just in Anchorage. So
okay, yeah. I guess I'm just being a bit. When I think of Alaska, I just think of just like wide open spaces. But of course, there's going to be normal populous
places in Alaska that are still as wild as they get. So, yeah.
So, okay, cool. So you went and did your PhD in philosophy, and am I right in thinking that your main focus is epistemology?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was my specialization in my for my dissertation. I also studied a lot of early modern philosophy, so people like Descartes and Locke and Hume and some others. And yeah, but since since leaving academe and in my own writing on mostly on my blogs, a little bit published, I do a lot of think pieces about philosophy of the internet, but also a lot about just pure philosophy. Like lately, I've been writing quite a bit about ethics, just pure ethics. I wrote an essay called "Why Be Moral." Gave my rundown on that. I also wrote a piece called "A Theory of Evil." I argue that evil does exist, and that it is. I give a definition basically of it, and various other things.
And can we see those on your blog if people want to go read those recent articles?
Yeah, LarrySanger.org.
Nice and simple, nice and simple. Okay, cool. So yeah, then after Nupedia came the whole Wikipedia journey, which is kind of well documented, and it's it's we talk about it in our previous conversation. But you spent how many years of your life building that platform with others?
Basically two. If you count the predecessor of Wikipedia, Nupedia, I think that counts because it took a while to actually figure out what the policies should be and to gather the initial community. So the reason that Wikipedia was able to take off so quickly is that it was based on the community that was already at work on Nupedia. And the policies that we started with, we had already hammered out, like the neutrality policy. Wikipedia's famous but now abandoned neutrality policy began life on Nupedia. Wikipedia's neutrality policy began life on Nupedia. So,
and I guess on a platform like that that's community driven, the policies and the rules and the frameworks is pretty much everything, because you're harnessing energy from the community, and it's all about how you funnel it dictates the culture of the platform.
Especially because it's collaborative, and very early on I declared, I'm not editor-in-chief. I actually want this to act like a wiki because I don't want to sort of like spoil the wiki magic. So I called myself chief instigator as opposed to the editor-in-chief.
And how do you describe that wiki magic for someone that isn't familiar? Let's say someone who only consumes wikis and consumes that part of the internet. How would you describe what that wiki magic is?
Well, as I was telling people, 18 years ago, basically imagine a bulletin board, except not just one bulletin board, but a whole series of connected bulletin boards. And anybody can write anything to any of the boards that they want. In fact, all you have to do to create a new bulletin board is to put up a new sticky note, and pops into existence another one. You can start working on that. And the idea is that the obvious objection to this is if anybody can go and without even signing in, which is insane, if anybody can go to any page and just start working, why isn't it full of vandalism? And the answer is that ultimately there's a lot more people who care about what the wiki looks like, and it's a lot easier for them to undo the changes than the people who just want to mess things up, and that's how it works. And it does actually work that way, and all of the other policies and procedures that Wikipedia has added on top of that is just elaborations of that basic dynamic of people having to work together on the same pages and trusting that most of the people at work on the site have it, the same goals.
Yeah, well, that word trust or trusting that you just said, I was going to ask, do you think that in order to get into a project like this and to build a project like this, one needs to have a basic belief and trust that people are going to probably, on average, behave quite well. And do you think that's true? And do you think you have that position?
That's a good question. And it's complicated, right? So I do have that position in general. It's easy to observe when you look at how active wikis work, that people, they arrive, they don't want to mess things up. If they do, they know that they will be rebuffed. And yet, there are people who have agendas, or who want to mess things up, but in slightly subtle or subtle enough ways. We would call them trolls, right? They exist for sure. They have always existed on Wikipedia. At first, I didn't think they didn't, that they would perhaps, because they didn't like show up right away. But eventually they'll find you out and just basically test the limits of the system. And
some of that's probably helpful, isn't it? Like the people that test the limits of the system, that probably helps you to keep developing and making the system stronger. In a way, that's kind of following nature's model, isn't it? But
yeah, it's a software. It's like a software model, right? So I see what you're saying there. But we're talking about social software versus just pure machine algorithms. And so when you're testing the system in that way, you're actually testing a social system more than you're testing a system of software. And sure, the system has to be robust, but at the same time, there has to be some baseline level of goodwill, good faith, to participate. Now, this is why when I started a competitor of Wikipedia called Citizendium, which failed to thrive, basically, one of the... What's that?
Why, in summary, why do you think it failed to...
It's very clear. It's because we were trying to take off at just the moment that Wikipedia was enjoying its steepest growth curve. So yeah, that was the wrong time to launch it for sure. If we had launched it like 3 or 4 or 5 years later, it would have made all the difference. Yeah, but one of the things that we required is that people agree to a statement of basic principles, and I think that in itself actually got rid of a sort of social contract. In other words, got rid of a lot of the problems. But I'll tell you, this is something I've done some writing about recently. I never published this, and I really should. But I think one of the main reasons why Wikipedia is as dysfunctional as it is that it has no way no established, credible way of solving disputes. So they've got an arbitration committee, but that isn't the way that most disputes are solved. They're mostly solved. Those are like only the worst, and that's got all kinds of other problems associated with it. But the theoretical way that disputes are supposed to be solved in Wikipedia is by consensus, as if it were possible to actually come up with a consensus on various disputed issues. Well, it's not possible, of course, but people are as it were, forced by the system to pretend that there is one, and that one is possible. And then people essentially jockey for position as the ones who have the authority to declare what the consensus is. So it's.
So how do you? So I get what you're saying about the limitations with that kind of committee and this like I guess, utopic goal of just achieving a neutrally framed consensus that's then valid. But how do you think? I mean, do you have an answer to that? Do you have a way that you think disputes should be settled when you're dealing with scale, let's say?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I've told the Everpedia guys, that system is not far enough along, hasn't been developed enough for this to rise up high enough in the priorities. But what I told them is there needs to be a community moderation where decisions on specific questions which are posed by community members are voted on by either everyone or for some otherwise not-involved subset of the community, a jury, as it were. Because ultimately, all of the debate that goes on in the Wikipedia talk pages, the discussion pages that are attached to each article, it just goes on and on and on for years on certain questions, on certain topics.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand what you're saying, let's say, for example, we had a global community of 1,000 people, and we wanted to decide whether or not we allow shoes inside the building. I mean, a really benign thing, but we can choose a better question if you like. But are you suggesting that anybody within the community could pose a question, and that question would get kind of voted on by everybody? Or are you suggesting that only certain people would be allowed, so you would surface to the selected people and then only certain people would vote? Or how would you imagine that?
Well, by stating the question in terms of a real life community, the way that you did, would change certain dynamics, and I wouldn't favor pure democracy in that case. But we're talking about an online community, and maybe a better question would be something like, in the article about racism, should we have definition A, definition B, or definition C? These are the ones that different groups or different forces in the community are getting behind, and so we need to make up our minds and actually fairly decide which one we're going to endorse. And then you basically put it to a vote. Now, Wikipedia does have a voting mechanism, but there's two problems with it. One, it's just too easy for people to create sock puppets, and they do. So a sock puppet is just an extra account that you make and control yourself, that you pretend is someone else. Or at least that's the bad kind of sock puppet. There are people who acknowledge that they have multiple accounts for different purposes and they don't overlap, and they're okay with that. But if you've got potentially one person with many votes, that's inherently unfair, and that goes back to Wikipedia's anonymity policy, which I, in a lot of ways, support and respect. I think anonymity is important for freedom of speech, ultimately. On the other hand, it makes what has to be like an online polity essentially impossible to control in any sort of constitutional way that I can detect anyway.
Yeah, I agree. If you allow for anonymity, you don't allow for reliability and accountability. It may allow the actual ideas to be stronger and be more, as you say, in that kind of freedom of speech way. You're more likely to get more honest speech, but to actually run a system that way feels like it's really hard to keep control of the beast.
Well, it's Well, I'll explain the idea later that I have that I think will allow anonymity. But yeah, but
So you mentioned Everypedia, which is if I'm right, it's a collection of knowledge bases, and the way you reward the creators of the pages is through tokens on the system. Would that at all get halfway to explaining what it is, or tell us a different way?
No, that's pretty much it. Basically, somebody who wants to make an edit is granted a certain number of tokens so they can begin to make edits. In order to make an edit, you have to actually stake a small number of tokens. You get those tokens back after a certain amount of time, if your edit is accepted by the community. The community basically does an up-down vote on each edit. And if you are rebuffed, then you lose your tokens. And if your edit is accepted, then you actually get a portion of the tokens that are unlocked every day.
So in terms of the things we've referred to already, the dynamics, this is kind of like not just hoping people won't vandalize and relying on the fact that it's easier to take the graffiti down, but actually incentivizing them if they do good art rather than just messing the place up. As well as, am I right in thinking it's because of the way the account system works, you don't get the anonymity, so everyone is kind of accounted for, or is that not correct?
It's possible to be entirely anonymous on Everpedia, but a lot of people do. I think for the usual sorts of, reputation building purposes, they do reveal their own real names.
Social rewards that you get from tagging it to yourself.
One of the first sorts of articles that Everpedia encourages people to write is an article about themselves. So
it's encouraged rather than mandatory. The system doesn't rely on it you being identifiable, but there's rewards for doing so in one way or another.
Right. It's kind of like Twitter in that regard. Yeah.
Building up your social capital as such.
Exactly.
So I know that you're moving on to work on an exciting new project. And is that an evolution of what the journey you've been on, or is it a bit of a sideways step? And can you tell us a bit about it?
It's the logical next step, and it doesn't feel like that much of a change. I'm working on the same idea that I worked on for Everpedia. So the way I like to introduce the idea is just think of all of the possible labor that could be expended on encyclopedia articles if people didn't have to go to one place to work on one article on each topic on Wikipedia, I mean, right? Imagine all of the experts who might write their own articles on topics if the canonical encyclopedia article in their field weren't already written, basically, for some, the leading encyclopedia in their discipline, right? The reason that people are not incentivized to do this is that the authority, essentially, you could call it the epistemic authority, the knowledge authority, to recognize something as an accurate statement of what is known on a topic, is concentrated in the hands of relatively few groups, right? And
inside Wikipedia and groups like that, yeah.
Like all the encyclopedias, Wikipedia especially, and more broadly, like all of the big publishers and social media companies too. They also constitute and are increasingly wielding power to shape the discourse, essentially. Well, that's not how blogs work, is it? All right. If you want to write a blog, there's no central blogging authority. And it's not like blogger.com or wordpress.com or Medium are like the places to go to if you want to write a blog and be heard. No. Why is that? Because there is a standard for blogging. RSS, really simple syndication, and also the Atom standard. These standards, they define the format of blog posts, and they create a uniform output for when somebody creates a blog. And then it's really easy for a programmer then to create a blog reader, or for that matter, to enable them to enable bloggers to move their blog from one platform to another platform. It's not that difficult because RSS allows that sort of portability.
And crucially, who owns RSS?
It's just the standard is developed by I know it's hosted in Harvard. I don't actually know who develops RSS, but it doesn't matter, right? Because it's a neutral technical standard, and the people who develop the standard have written it in their wisdom and good sense, have written it in a way that doesn't impose any sort of editorial restrictions on what people may put on their blogs.
And that's what I mean, because it's not housed in a corporate vehicle with a corporate agenda or backed by a finance group.
It's an open standard.
It allows for that simple purity where, as you use the word wisdom, you believe that the reason it exists is not for any particular agenda, just because it's a helpful tool to help people communicate, like kind of the way the web should be.
Yeah. Exactly. It's an open standard. You say like the web should be. So in that, it resembles email. It resembles the World Wide Web, and a few other technologies that are truly decentralized. They are centerless. There is no top-down control. Totally democratic. That's how the internet used to be.
Okay, so if we have RSS, the open standard here, and we have Zuckerberg's Facebook here, where on that continuum would you place Wikipedia at this point?
It's a lot closer to the Facebook model.
So even though it's run by a foundation, like funded by a foundation, the way the power structure works and decisions are made feels a lot more to you like the corporate end of the spectrum rather than the open end.
Yeah, mainly because it's centralized, and controlled. It isn't top down controlled, but it's controlled by, it's basically an oligarchy. Yeah, okay. Well, why don't we create, in the same way that there is a blogosphere defined by RSS for blogs, we need to create an encyclosphere defined by a new technical standard for encyclopedias, for communicating encyclopedic information, in other words, and basically enable people to publish feeds of encyclopedia articles and other people to create encyclopedia article readers, and then let 1,000 flowers bloom. You're all drawing from the same shared commons of encyclopedia articles, instead of having to go to Wikipedia or, for that matter, Evropedia. Now, the role of Evropedia, and this is kind of to get back to the question you were asking earlier, like, is this a continuation of your work on Evropedia? The answer is yes. Evropedia wants to use the standards that I'm going to be developing for basically gathering articles and cataloging articles in its IQ network, basically. So the IQ right now, all of their articles are drawn from everpedia.org, but they want to basically eventually become a catalog of all the encyclopedia articles that are out there and be the first app that does that. But they don't have to be the last by any means, because they will be just another encyclopedia reader.
Okay, interesting. And this is going to be a really dumb question of a multitude of different questions. Why didn't you do this 15 years ago? Why isn't this the thing that you built at the beginning of the journey?
Didn't think of it. Didn't understand the didn't understand about open standards. There's a lot that I didn't understand. I didn't actually have the idea for this until like 2014.
Oh, fair enough then. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's after actually making a rating site for educational videos for kids called Watch Know, and now it's called Watch Know Learn, under somebody else's supervision. Yeah, and so the whole idea of like finding all the kinds of content of a certain kind and then putting it in rank order, inviting a distributed community to rank all of the, well, in that case, videos about a particular topic. It's actually a very powerful idea, and that website is actually very useful to teachers, I'm proud to say. But you know, just generalizing the idea, I didn't really get serious about doing it. I'm sure I had the idea before, but I didn't really get serious about articulating it, get really excited about it until about 2014. And
well, it's amazing because the way you explain the logic to me and comparing to RSS, which I understand, makes it feel such a logical thing. And how could we not have this tool? Why do we not demand it? And I guess my next logical question is, how do you intend to protect the idea, to keep it simple and open and free, so that some other Zuckerberg doesn't come along and go, oh, that's a great idea, Larry. How am I going to make a pretty penny from capitalizing on this good and open idea?
Yeah. So this is why I'm leaving Everpedia and starting an independent knowledge standards foundation. So that's what it's called. And I have, you're the first person I've told.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's just because we happen to have this set up for, and the news is, I'm not going to hide the news.
No, Larry, you've been waiting to tell me. You've been, no, I get it. I'm.
No, so, not just the foundation, but the fact that I've given back all of my equity. It's like I didn't take any money for it, and I didn't have any of IQ tokens to cash in, so I have not. Basically, they paid my salary, and now it's done. All right, and the idea is. They don't owe me any favors. I don't owe them any favors. I'm not even an advisor of theirs any longer. Now, this is not to say that we're unfriendly or anything. We're still perfectly friendly.
No, but you're a free man. You're untethered.
I'm absolutely untethered. I'm free. And now what I want to do is I want to get together a board of directors that is absolutely stellar. I'm going to take my time. I'm not going to try to do it quickly. I'm going to find people with absolutely unimpeachable integrity, who are. I'm going to check them out every way to Sunday, and
you can, and I believe you can.
Well, I can try. I'm not an expert, but I think I have enough connections. I think I'll be able to find people who will be able to help me do it. And I will also have them and declare myself that I'm that the foundation is committed to a certain set of principles, right? And In fact, if you like, I can just go through some of the principles, because this is actually how I answer your question.
Just define for me, how would, the thing I think a lot about is values. Like, I'm always trying to define our values, which for me defines the character of the organization, not the personality of it, but the character. Are principles the same as values, or are they a bit more tangible, or how would you differentiate them?
It's interesting that you should ask that question, because I was just writing about it last week in that essay that I mentioned earlier, Why Be Moral? Values are basically, a value is basically something that is valuable. It is something that is deemed to be good. And the interesting kind of values are the intrinsic values, things that are ends in themselves, things that we seek out for their own sake. And then principles are, you could think of them as rules, or at least rules of thumb that you should follow to secure the values.
Okay. So it is the next layer up in organization. You're starting at the essence or the spirit of the project, and then you're like, how do we begin to shape our activities so that they come in accordance?
Well, I mean, the basic goal of the foundation is simply to negotiate among various potential stakeholders to get to the very best statement of standards. And again, we're not talking about editorial standards here. We're talking about technical standards for the publishing of encyclopedic information in a shared commons, right? So that's the goal. Now, the values, though, I'll go through them. First of all, independence. We will not be beholden to any publisher, government, corporation, religion, or other organization at all. Neutrality is another one. We will take proactive and extensive steps to ensure neutrality in all respects. So we're going to piss off people who want it to be biased, and I'm gonna be glad about doing that.
I can see it in your face. I can see you're going to be glad about it.
So basically, we will take proactive and extensive steps to ensure neutrality in all respects. In politics, we will not favor the left or the right. As to religion, we will favor neither atheism nor Christianity nor any other religious attitude, and so forth. And I think this is going to be fairly easy, right? Because all we have to do is say, well, none of these things are going to be mentioned in the standards. There's no reason to, in the same way that there isn't any need to mention politics or religion or anything else in the specification for blogging.
Yeah, and it's like, in a way, a lot of, I guess, your principles are about what you just don't account for rather than what you do account for.
Right. And there's some other things. I'll go through them a little more quickly. Credibility. So we strongly wish to support the most trusted and distinguished institutions and experts, and this is why a rating system will be necessary. Now, this doesn't mean that we are going to, be the kingmakers and bless certain people as experts. Rather, we will enable individuals to be able to declare that, in their opinion, other people are experts. And then people who write apps will be able to gather all that information and do whatever they want with it. And then free speech. Ordinary undistinguished scholars will be able to post whatever they like to their article feeds, just as anyone can publish a blog. And then another one is responsibility. The standards will allow governments, corporations, and others to identify to the public any content that they regard as illegal. And I think this is actually going to be important for certain people to be able to take the whole thing seriously. And it's also going to be how the system will be set up to monitor spam and copyright violation and things like that. But of course, publishers in jurisdictions will not have to, respect all the directives that are published in the metadata. But like, if some French regulator says, the following articles may not be published in France, then it becomes clear how to do that. And people who want to go around them will just have to use a VPN.
But from the standard side, you're trying to take a transnational approach. Your starting point isn't the law of any land. It's your values and principles starting, and then if those things, are you saying, just to clarify, if you're saying if what I write happens to say be illegal in Uzbekistan and somebody wants to read it in Uzbekistan, what kind of, you're not trying to block my content at a platform level, but you're allowing it within the standards to not.
The standards can't allow or disallow anything. All that we will do is create a data field, essentially, that allows anyone actually to make a declaration of what is verboten and not. So if Uzbekistan establishes, okay, we hereby publish the following code is our code, and when we you'll be able to basically mark up other articles in your own feeds, right? So Uzbekistan would just create a whole feed of the issues that it has. The following violate our laws, and then they will just write laws around that, I suppose. But I myself think that there's a need for this in perfectly freedom-loving countries, right? Because you still want to have some sort of responsible mechanism for identifying things like copyright violation, and for that matter, basically stuff that is specifically intended to screw the system up, like uploading 1 million copies of the same article, and then there's got to be technical means of app writers to get around that,
For the last few months, I've been working with a company called paid.co.uk. And Paid is a platform that gets you, freelancers, people who work for yourselves, paid as soon as you've done the work. And this gets rid of all of the not knowing about when you're going to get paid. When I've done deals for YouTube or done speaking gigs or even done consulting and coaching, I don't know when I'm going to get paid. And it's the worst when I've got to pay out other people who have come to help me film or help me produce the work that I'm doing. Paid exists to support freelancers to be as creative and productive as they can, to help outsource the parts they don't need to do themselves, to be friendly and fair, and make sure you get your money and make sure that your client pays up at the right time. So for example, last month I made an invoice and got it financed through Paid, sent it to my client. I got paid immediately after I'd done the day's work, and I don't need to worry. I don't know if they have paid yet or not. It's not any longer my problem. Paid follow that up with no recourse to me, and I get to crack on with the next project. So if you want to check it out, go to paid.co.uk. It's perfect if you're a web consultant, a freelancer, a digital nomad, digital creative, making videos, photos, that kind of thing, especially if you've got other costs you've got to pay alongside within the project. Go to paid.co.uk, check it out, sign up for the beta. I think you might really like it. And thanks to Paid for supporting these new podcasts. And so you've written these principles. You're set about to build this organization. What's the next step, man?
Well, I think it's going to go pretty fast. So by the time that this is posted, some things that I'm about to say hopefully will have already happened. I haven't even actually started writing the website. That should be up by the time this is published.
And what's the website going to be?
Knowledgestandards.org.
Knowledgestandards.org. Great.
Yeah. Encyclosphere.org and .com will be redirected to knowledgestandards.org.
And that's ENCYCLOSHPERE.
SPHERE. Encyclo, as in encyclopedia, sphere, as in blogosphere.
Encyclosphere.org and .com will go to Knowledge Standards Foundation.
Knowledgestandards.org. Yeah.
Sorry, got it.
Yep. I'm not going to make any app myself. I might even put that in as another principle. So I don't want to. I don't want the foundation to be competing with the people who make apps. I want the organization to be able to be trusted as a neutral arbiter among all the potential app developers and publishers, encyclopedia publishers.
I was going to say that about Everypedia. Like, you're explaining how they hope to now start pulling in articles from other places, but once you already have a repository that's in the middle of your setup, it's hard to imagine that it'll ever even out in a completely open way. And maybe it will, but I think I like the idea that if you start from the position that you don't build on top of your own kind of standards platform, then it means that in the same way that you've released yourself from previous responsibilities, if you don't then build stuff on top, then it keeps it very clear what your remit is, which increases like trust essentially, doesn't it?
Yes. I think it's going to be really important to, especially because, to continue answering your previous question, another thing that I'm going to be working very hard on is fundraising, because all of the money that we depend on will be from individuals and eventually, I suppose, foundations, maybe academic institutions, not corporations, and not for-profit corporations, and not governments. So we're going to reject that kind of money, and it's going to probably, I hope, if it works, it will be crowdfunded. But if it's going to be crowdfunded, then I've got to make it as popular as possible with the crowd. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. That's the point of publishing the principles. Another thing that I'm going to be doing is setting up a blog. I'm thinking, I don't know if it's ultimately going to work this way, but I'm thinking that it'll be a group blog. Anyone will be able to create an account and submit a top-level article. It's going to have to be substantive. It can't be disrespectful or anything. It's a serious long-form discussion. And then, of course, for underneath each one, we will have a nice long talk about policies and so forth. And again, this could take time to actually pin down. But another thing that I want to do actually right out of the gate is to encourage people to actually just start writing encyclopedia articles, and other people start slurping up all of the encyclopedia articles that they can find online and get them out there in a machine, get databases of them, updated databases of them out there in a machine processable format. And then we'll take their work and we'll use that to actually define the standard. I imagine that's going to be how it'll work.
So do you have a fundraising remit right now? Like to get from like, let's say we're at day one or whatever, to get to the next step, do you need funding in order to get there? Or can you get there just through people contributing? Or are you trying to raise cash now to make sure that when the time comes, you've got the war chest is well stocked?
Yeah, I don't have much runway, if that's the question. And I am going to be depending on the goodwill of people who are excited about the idea to help me build the organization that can bring this thing into existence. Like right now, I'm working out of my home office, but what I really want to do is actually open a real office in probably Canal, Winchester, Ohio, and hire a small staff and just start executing really hard on all the things that are necessary to make this a reality. I mean, you'd think that the basic idea doesn't really take that much, right? And it really shouldn't, because all we're trying to do is articulate some standards.
I mean, I think the RSS metaphor really helps for the everyday internet user, and I think what would be really good for the everyday user is to hear, like, what is the pain point that this really nails for the everyday internet user? Like, is it that in a world of, is it that centralized organizations are throttling our own learning? Is it that in a world of fake news, we need to make sure that we can trust our knowledge sources? Like, what is the...
Yes. Yeah, those two definitely. Those are both pain points that a lot of people have. They're worried about the bias of information, and they're worried about the reliability of information. People on the right are worried that it's biased. People on the left are worried that it's only so much disinformation. I'm very sympathetic to both concerns, actually, but neither one of those concerns is what really gets me excited. And the thing that I will tell people over and over is just the following vision. I think I told you this before, but I can give it to you again. So just imagine if there were, give me a controversial topic, a timely controversial topic.
Let's talk about, abortion comes to mind.
Okay, fine. Abortion. So just imagine dozens of encyclopedia articles. They have to be encyclopedia articles, right? But they are attempts to state what is known about abortion, all right? And imagine a whole raft of ratings of all of these articles, especially the best written articles. They have got dozens, maybe hundreds or thousands of ratings, right? The ones that are further down don't have as many ratings, but enough ratings to allow them to sort of ascend rankings. There isn't any centralized rankings. The rankings are all going to be determined by different apps, right? All that will be on the in the standards and in the encyclosphere itself, in people's feeds, in other words, are here is my ID in the system, and this is my rating for the abortion article, right? So apps aggregate all that together, and then you have this amazing, beautiful thing. You actually can identify, according to all of the Christians, because users will be able to declare, will be able to tag themselves in various ways. So according to self-identifying Christians, the best article about abortion is this one. And according to atheists, and feminists and whatnot, the best articles are this one or that one. And then, wouldn't it be interesting to see what the best article would be according to Hindus, or according to South Africans or whatever? I think it would be it could be something that would open the eyes of the world to not just what we all think, but the very best expressions of what we all think.
Well, it goes back to your original metaphor of like a thousand flowers all blooming. I think it done well, this could help us embrace a world of diversity and build empathy for other people's viewpoints as well, because
maybe not. I'm not going to rule this out. See, we need to discuss all of these things. They need to discuss all these things. I hope so. I actually think that's true, but I'm not going to rule out the possibility that familiarity breeds contempt. If we've learned one thing from Facebook, that it's got to be that. People constantly seeing their friends and family members' political views always splashed online is something that's very divisive. On the other hand, I'm just playing the devil's advocate when I say that, and I don't actually. I hope that's not true. I hope that that's not how it's going to work. There's good reason to think that it actually might end up having a really good impact on the world. And that is by showing people, because look, when people get really pissed off at each other on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, it's because they're using these stupid memes and making these oracular pronouncements that are incredibly insulting to their religion or whatever. Here we're talking about the best written statement of your own opinion on different subjects. And in order to be the highest rated article, according to a vast array of Democratic Party voters, or a vast array of Republican voters, not the party officials. We're talking about the rank and file. In order to appeal to the best, to be the best article according to that number of people, it would have to be a really, really good article. And the other side of, when they look at it, they're gonna. I am pretty sure that they will at least grudgingly admit that wow, this is actually pretty interesting. It will help people to understand each other, because it will be our best statement of each point of view. That's what
and that's what I'm getting at when I talk about the empathy, is because if I only hear a poorly written or cheap shot version of a different viewpoint on approaching a subject, I'm not gonna. It's not putting it in its best light. But I have the best chance. Put it this way: I think I have the best chance of understanding and appreciating a different viewpoint to mine, or a different lens through which something's been written, if it's the very best of those writers, or the best written and best well informed of that group. And I think the other thing, in a world of agenda that is overrun by corporation and corporate agenda, just knowing the viewpoint from which this article was written, or at least not written, but the viewpoint which appreciates most this article, that helps increase my awareness and understanding of what I'm about to read, in a way that brings me into the light, rather than wondering what corporate agenda is running over my head, or what in this case, not necessarily corporate agenda, but what viewpoint, what lens is powering the way they've written the article, what is omitted from this.
Yeah. It would solve so many problems potentially. I mean, just imagine if you're at all familiar with the vaccine debates. There are a lot of people who think that vaccines are dangerous the other side hears that much and says, well, of course they're anti-science and they're just fools. But the anti-vaxxers have not really been allowed to get their point across in my experience. I've actually listened to them a little bit, and they're not nearly as crazy as they sound, because a lot of what they're talking about is basically anti-corporate, and basically saying that certain vaccines have not been tested properly, and they've been basically pushed on the public before they're really ready, and things like that, right? So if you can, I think that there are a lot of powerful interests that try to control narratives, and it's difficult for us to get information about anything that goes contrary to those narratives, because most of the professional writers and researchers are not working outside of the narratives. It's difficult, and they get discouraged. The writers, even if they're really good writers or really good researchers, the phenomenon happens all the time in academia, especially. Right? You've got a minority point of view about your pet topic. Nobody is listening to you. Because it's a minority point of view, and it's difficult for you to get a hearing. But there are people actually who have your point of view, and if you all got together essentially and picked out the best statement of that point of view, then it actually might change minds.
When I think about in a leadership capacity, when I have to make a decision and stand behind it with confidence, I don't seek out friends who are accommodating to me. I seek out advisors who are outspoken in their position, and I often, to try to get the right information in my mind, I try to get one of each side to give me their best effort of explaining unequivocally and unrelentingly what their position is. Now, when I have those two strong views in my mind, I can then take those and I can find my path. And actually, it's only once I feel I've got both voices in my head and know where they're coming from that I can then find the decision I've come to be a reliable one that I can comfortably move forwards with. And because obviously, when you're leading a group or a team, you have to be able to really stand firmly on your conviction. And I can only do that when I feel I know I've got balanced advice and I know the agenda with which the advice has come. As long as I know what the agenda is, that's fine. And so it feels, in a way, I'm humanizing it, but in a way, this could be a platform that could build confidence in people, that they have been able to quite quickly get to the best version of different viewpoints on a subject so that they can get to a position more quickly and more clearly, which is obviously an invaluable thing.
Right. Yes. And there's another thing that is, it's actually potentially revolutionary in some ways. I mean, Wikipedia itself has been revolutionary in that it has enabled the world to become informed about a lot more easily about a lot of things that were not allowed to be published. This is one of the reasons why China has censored, and Turkey also has censored Wikipedia. But I think we can do better. I think that not only better in terms of the quality of the articles, or the quantity for that matter. I think we could have orders of magnitude more articles about absolutely everything. I'm totally on board with the Everpedia vision there, the encyclopedia of everything. So there, in addition to all of that, there's quite a bit of information that is deliberately hidden because corporations or governments or whatever religions like I don't know, the Christian Scientists or the Scientologists or whatever, the Catholic Church. They don't want you to know. And sometimes because they are so powerful, it's difficult to get the information out there, right? In a way that is credible, right? It's the credibility of exposés of the hidden information that is the problem. And this is a system, because it's totally decentralized. This is a system that would potentially make it possible, especially if the rating part of the system works well. It's possible for us to actually get to the bottom of all kinds of things that we never were able to get to the bottom of.
It doesn't need much encouragement or explaining to say how powerful that could be and how much I want to use it. On a side note, have you ever seen a film called Spotlight?
Spotlight. I'm afraid I haven't.
It's a journalistic film showing this journey of uncovering a paedophile ring within the Catholic Church in Boston, I think it was. And they kind of show the journalistic journey based on real events. And there's just this very powerful moment in it that I will never forget. And I've gone back and cut out that clip to replay to myself because I love it so much. And they kind of building the story, and they found a few of the culprits, and they've got some data, and they're building the credibility of the story. And then they're like, let's run with it. And then the guy in charge, the leading the team, is like, no, like, we're going after the system. Like, we don't publish until it's as credible as it can be, and it brings to light the whole systemic issue that comes right from the top of this organization. And something in me just rose, and I was like, this is the work, this is what it's about, the patience and the dedication to changing how systems operate. And in a way, it sounds like a platform that carries a similar spirit to me.
Yeah, and if it's decentralized in the way that the internet is, then there is no single neck to cut off. There's no one person to suicide if you want to stop the signal, because the articles will, for the most part, I expect, won't be required by the system, by the network, but I think most people will probably share their articles under some sort of open content license, and that will enable other people to make use of it. They can obviously make use of articles just as sources, and this the idea of a completely distributed peer review of encyclopedia articles also will create the possibility of communities that both go after stories really vigorously, but also in order to compete, have to do the very best, or they won't retain the top spot.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, in order to bring light to powerful centralized organizations, it takes other organizations or groups or communities to be organized in different ways that aren't subject to the same constraints in order to shed light, in order to do something differently. And so I can see why that's vital to the mission.
But I guess you can see from the case of Wikipedia, various discussion groups, and all kinds of startups that start virtually. This can all be the sort of knowledge seeking that can be done virtually, shared across the entire world. There's no reason not to do it that way. And so anyway, I guess I'm just saying obvious things now.
Let's do it. You certainly sold me. And I guess in light of this podcast being called New Agreements, how would you summarize what the new agreement you think we need in society around how we store knowledge is. Then how would you frame it in terms of like, here's the new agreement that we all need to kind of try and get on board with?
So I think we need to get on board with the idea of the free sharing of knowledge according to an agreed encyclopedia standard. And if we can simply agree on a standard that is duly published, everything's just going to flow from that. And I don't say this about many ideas, but this is an idea such that if you build it, they will come. If you just get it out there, it will start getting used, because whoever I talk to about this idea, they get very enthusiastic about it. So I believe enough in it that I'm willing to take a leap of faith that it's the money is going to be there, even from small donors. I
think there will be, and I get it, and if I get it, that's a good sign. And if you want help in trying to pull together like a 60-90 second intro pitch video for the everyday internet user of how and why this is really invaluable and worth investing in, then that's something that I'd be pleased to try and help with one way or another.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm going to hold you to that, because that's actually something that I was thinking about. So, yep. I'm going to write it down right now. Dave Erasmus video. All right. And if anybody else wants to, help out in similar ways, by all means, get in touch with me, and I will add your name to the list here. And
yeah, any of you guys watching who are filmmakers or animators or script writers, anything like that, ping either of us an email, and maybe we'll get a little group together or something like that if it can be of help.
No, that's a great idea. And again, it's a non-profit. I'm going to publish the books. All the money we take in, all the money we spend, I'm never going to pay myself more than $150,000 in 2019 terms. I'm not looking to get rich on this. I just want to have a decent middle class lifestyle, doing something that I really love.
I think that really comes through. And I remember when we spoke in May, and I just remember closing our conversation saying something like, in a world that's full of agenda and greed and money in the internet, and quick wins, I may not agree with you on absolutely everything, but I do feel I can trust you. When we talk, I feel like I think you're actually speaking your truth from an authentic and open place, and that is kind of rare to find at the top levels in the internet and technology world. So pleased to that's why I'm pleased to be in conversation again, Larry.
Appreciate that.
And if you have a little time, it would be nice to discuss some of the things that I've been spinning through and see what questions it creates for you.
Yeah, sure.
So when we were together in May, I kind of began to discuss with you, I think I'd just done the talk at Thinking Digital called Creating Beyond Nations, and the viewpoint, kind of in the same way that you're looking digitally transnationally with what you're describing in terms of how we hold knowledge, I'm thinking the biggest existential threats that we're facing in terms of the environmental crisis, the refugee crisis. We have 60 million refugees, and in the next 20 years, they're predicting between, depending on who you listen to, 300 million and a billion, based on environmental issues. Like, for example, Bangladesh going underwater, that will create a huge amount of movement through borders and loads of chaos. And then the third being kind of how we relate to AI, and depending on, and other transformative technologies, but I think it's good shorthand just to talk about machine intelligence. And there's lots of viewpoints there. And obviously, as you can tell, I'm looking at kind of 10,000 feet here. Don't want to get too pulled into one of the subjects or the others. But what these three all have in common for me is that none of them respects nationality. None of these problems respect a national paradigm, let's say. And, you know, if somebody in Croatia builds a self-learning machine that kind of gets out of hand, that can kind of keep learning on it of its own, it's not going to know much about whether it's in Croatia or whether it's in America. In the same way, the environment doesn't care about nations, etc., etc. Nations are fictitious by nature. They've been created by us, and that's important. We need that for cultural kind of identity and meaning and feeling like we're a part of something. But I guess the more I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, I'm not sure that this is where all the power, where we should be trusting all the power to be. And actually, given that the biggest troubles are global, maybe we need to be starting to invest in infrastructure, governance, infrastructure at a global level. But obviously, like we talked about, you don't want Trump running the world, basically. You don't want anybody being in charge of the world. That's like a very poor looking future and very vulnerable. But the kind of the journey I've been exploring is how could we move towards having maybe a dual citizenship. So there's a sense that I pay into and expect services from a national government that is the physical country that I'm living in. But then maybe also I pay into and expect some services from a global government that I'm also a part of. And obviously, at this point, it's an opt-in thing. And I've actually begun to experiment with it. So I've opened a community fund, and I've taken 10 of my friends paying 1% of our gross income, so like 40 quid a month or 50 pounds a month or something like that, into this communal pot. And we're currently just meeting quarterly over Zoom like this to make decisions about how we spend the government taxes, although it's only very small. It's like a practical experiment. So we did actually send £200 to a sustainable fish farm in Rwanda. A friend who's over there who I know will invest it in more agricultural gear to create more employment and more food. And that's kind of, in a way, he's not paying taxes. So you could kind of see that as foreign aid, in a way, from the group. But we're also developing the tools by which to decide. So not just making decisions, but also creating the structure of how do we make decisions, which is very much like the kind of stuff that you would...
Software?
At the moment, what I used was like with super hacky. I just used Zoom. And I recorded the call like this and then posted it to anybody that couldn't attend the call. And they had 24 hours. And I used a website called Slido. So basically, it allows real-time voting. Very, very crude, like wouldn't scale. But I knew everyone who was on the call. So I knew that everybody... And I knew how many people were on the call. So I knew you couldn't like duplicate it.
So let me unload a thought on you before I forget it, just in reaction to what you've said so far, if I may. On the one hand, you say that what you would like to do is to have a global government that we all pay into and expect services from.
Or there could be 200 of them to choose from, but yeah.
Okay, but, and well, no. If it's a global government, it really is a global government, then there can only be one. Because then it's not... I mean, because then if there isn't a single sovereign, right, over a certain geographical area, then it's not a government. It's a civic organization. So to finish my thought, after you said that, you were talking about this well-meaning sounding organization, contributing, investing money in like African business or whatever. That sounds great. But that strikes me as being that's like a civic organization, right? It's and you could call it either something like Amnesty International, an international organization, or if you want, you could call it a super national organization like I forget the word. Anyway.
Yes, but it would be misleading to think that all of the funds were going to be spent like that. That happens to be potentially a misleading first example, but
whatever. Yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying, but I guess what I'm saying though is, unless there is some step that you intend to go beyond a group of people contributing to a common fund, then you're definitely not talking about a government, right? That's not a government. That's a voluntary organization. Happens to be international. Sounds like, depending on how the money is spent, sounds like it could be, extremely worthwhile.
So what about this then? One of the ideas I've been working on, which is not an immediate idea, as you could imagine, this would take 10 or 20 years to develop credibly, but two of the friends within our group are Syrian refugees and currently do not have citizenship that's active and helpful in any given nation state system. Now, imagine
for Syria.
Okay. Well,
No, I mean, you said they're Syrian refugees. I don't know.
I actually, I don't know if they have their passport from Syria or not, but all I know is, for example, one friend is stuck in Germany and can't travel. And actually, she can a little bit. She has some limited travel rights, but it's not the freedom that we're used to.
Of course.
And so her citizenship is dramatically pared back because she had to leave due to war and bombing, and a lot of her community has gone.
Okay.
So in my opinion, the nation state has kind of failed her. That the citizenship and that paradigm is not providing for her, and she's done nothing wrong. She's not done anything wrong. She's just trying to stay alive, and as a result of that,
Syria has certainly failed her. That's for sure. But you blame it on the nation state, which is a very important.
Yeah, I do, because I think that if a innocent person whose life gets interrupted dramatically because of things way outside of their control, just geopolitical decisions that are being made by different countries, and she tries to move around on the planet and then cannot function as we would expect to and want to and hope to. As a result, that feels like that whole system is failing. There's no reason why a fully...
I disagree. I'm sorry, but I mean, you're expecting all systems to be perfect, and whatever new system that you would come up with would have also extreme imperfections as well. That's arguing from an issue with the failure of one nation state and the other countries maybe not stepping up as you think they should. That's a problem with maybe those countries. I'll grant that much, but it takes a lot more argument to say that it's a problem with the nation state. That's a philosophical argument, man. That's a much harder nut to crack if you actually wanted to construct a critique of the nation state as such.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that you can just pin it on that, because for a nation state system to work in the world as it does, that whole system naturally has a bunch of different kind of countries operating in different kinds of ways. And I guess what I'm saying is that we, like what you said earlier, I do think we can and should do better than accepting the system as it is. I agree that no system is perfect, and I agree that there will be flaws in any kind of system. But for me, I guess what I'm saying, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, the flaws and the cost that is being created because of this essentially competitive geographical power system that we have, for me, is sufficient. The flaws are sufficient that it's worth trying to build a new part to the system, or a different system. They could cohabit, or they may be able to find a way to cohabit, they may not. But I don't think if all of a sudden someone started blowing up America for whatever reason, like let's say Trump goes out there and does some stuff and people want to start bombing America, I would want to make sure that you, Larry, still had the freedoms that you deserve to be able to move to a safer place, or a place that wasn't underwater, or a place that wasn't stuck, basically. I wouldn't want you to be stuck, because you, as a human, like, I think Team Human deserves to try to figure out a way to continue to live on this biosphere and not get stuck.
So this is all kind of vague, though. Dave, you're making a philosophical argument, and so I'm switching into philosophical mode, which is a lot harder.
Please do. It's a process, and I welcome the critique.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, you speak rather vaguely of competing systems without actually defining what the competing systems are. You say that there are certain rights that a person deserves regardless of the nation state that they happen to be a citizen of. There are some people who are not citizens at all, but subjects of totalitarian regimes. If what you said were true, then I think it would follow that all of those people would have the right to travel to a free country, and that would be, I think we can agree, a disaster for the free countries of the world if all of the non-free people were to en masse go. And then maybe what you're saying is people have the rights that you claim that they have, or not just the rights. I'll grant that they have the rights, but they have a claim on actual individual other people or countries, right? That have to be respected. Maybe what you're saying is if somebody actually asserts the claim, like your friends, the Syrian woman did in Germany, then it needs to be respected. But that actually is part of the problem of what's created this enormous influx of people into Europe and the United States. From point south, the expectation that people's claims to various kinds of asylum, economic or real, that those, I forgot the beginning of the sentence. Anyway, that those claims would have to be respected, right? And that's, if you publish that, basically what you're essentially saying is open borders, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? Why shouldn't I conclude that is what you're claiming? And that's a different discussion than the one that you want to say. All you're trying to say is, my poor Syrian friend should be able to come to Germany and just live a decent life. That would be nice, I agree. If it were like one or a few, but when it gets to be 60 million, and you can see all kinds of major societal upheavals resulting, then it's a problem, right? And then there's a difference between there. Actually, this is interesting, right? You have to be able to draw a distinction when you're discussing this between asylum seeking and invasion. And it sounds absurd to say that, doesn't it? It sounds absolutely absurd, right? Of course, asylum seeking, invasion, they're two completely different things. Well, they're not different if you've got enough people who are seeking asylum all at the same time, right?
For me, is that like when we talk about the internet and we talk about the intellectual realm, I guess, the realm of knowledge and sharing of knowledge, our viewpoints are like identical, almost, it feels like. You know, it's kind of, it feels like everything you say, I agree with. I think I didn't have any points that I think too differently on, definitely not deeply differently. But when it comes to the physical world, the biological world, and the biological borders around the US or around Germany or these different countries that we've created only in the last few hundred years, we're coming at it from very, very different perspectives, I think, to begin with. I think, so that's one interesting thing for me to note about how different, in the different spheres of life, our viewpoints become. I guess the only thing, I'm not sitting here claiming to have all the answers.
Doesn't surprise me that much, to tell the truth. It doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, people. Well, because in different areas of philosophy, I think of this in terms of philosophy. In different subjects, they do not closely constrain, do not directly constrain what people think in other subjects. So it's possible for Thomas Reid, Scottish founder of the Scottish School of Common Sense, to be a traditional realist in metaphysics and epistemology, and yet to be basically a socialist in politics, right? These things do not normally go together, but it doesn't matter because, yeah.
Oh no, I think it's okay. I'm just interesting. It's interesting for me to note that it is different in the different realms, and you're right. Maybe that's to be expected. I think the only thing I would, rather than kind of responding to your points around my vagity and me attempting to get clarity for myself or for you, I think the only thing I would say is, in a world where you said like that would just be chaos when referring to open borders. Now,
well, that wouldn't be the end of my argument, but we can just begin with that. So yeah.
I just want to go a step back, which is to say, if we were living in a world, I guess a lot of the explorations I'm doing right now are because I believe that we're living in an unprecedented world that means we're moving into, like, the systems we have are not going to be able to handle the problems that we're facing. That's my basic thinking. So when I'm thinking about, I believe it when we see the statistics of between 200 million and 1 billion people on the move because they literally won't have a home anymore. So on the basis that okay. Well, maybe when your site comes out and we start getting all the knowledge set in the right way, maybe I'll think differently. But right now, on the basis of the papers I've read and the articles I've seen, I believe that to be true. And so I'm asking myself, what is the best infrastructure to help handle peacefully that kind of level of forced migration around the world? And I'm not sure that the system that we've got is going to handle that. And that's my starting point, is what I'm saying to you. So you could say it, yeah. I mean, if you don't think that's true and you think the 60 million displaced people we have now is the most we're going to face and we can reduce that, then...
No, I think the reason that we have 60 million displaced people right now does not have to do with, global warming or anything like that. It has to do very, very, very straightforwardly with the fact that Europe and the United States tolerate the immigration. People hear that and they go, "Hey, let's go where life is better."
I think.
You don't think that's true?
To say life is better covers a whole range of things, from their homes being bombed by the countries that we're talking about. But I don't.
But that's not why most people are moving from Africa and Mexico and the Middle East to.
Why?
I've been.
There are, like your Syrian friend. There's absolutely totally.
Real upheavals that happen. A case can be made that maybe she should be going to Lebanon or Turkey or something like that, and it's not clear why she has to go all the way to Europe. Then it looks more or less like seeking asylum, and more like economic asylum.
People are moving because of very dangerous stuff. They're moving for economic reasons, as you're describing, and they are moving because of environmental crisis. And I could.
I don't know about that.
Well, they are. But I could go and look and see the statistics. But we could have a further conversation about that. I guess it would probably take too long to find agreement in this conversation. But I think if you don't think that dramatic change is going to happen because of environmental crisis, then I guess, there would be no reason to even consider dramatic change in our overall system, because you're probably then coming from the position of saying, well, it's a lesser of other.
It's strange that you would say that, because the left has been in favor of open borders for generations now. The whole idea of internationalism in general has been championed for all kinds of different reasons throughout the years. Using environmental crisis looks to me like just another excuse. And those, even if it, in 10 years there's a profound global cooling, and the people stop talking about it and realize, oh, well, that was just a problem. Then they'll immediately go back to other reasons, right? I actually think the reason why people so desperately want global solutions is that they're idealists, and there's no other reason than that. Ultimately, they think that the world ought to be as they envision it to be, and they want to just do what they can to bring it into being. The way they want it to be, of course, is and I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm talking about most utopians who talk in this way about like one world government, globalism in a positive way. They think everybody should be living the way that they do. And how can we make that happen? When you travel from London to New York, to Singapore, to Sydney, to wherever, Dubai, the hotels that you stay in are pretty similar. The entertainments that you see in those places are not that different. The sorts of cars that you drive, the roads that you drive on, the categories of businesses that you pass as you're driving down the road, they're all very similar. The people that you meet when you're like talking at conferences and so forth, they're all very witty, urbane. Almost all of them speak English, of course, and they make up what looks like a global community already. And wouldn't it be great if we could just get everybody else in the world in the same way? And how are we going to How can we make that happen? I think this is actually the thought that underlies, or the observation that underlies a lot of the motive behind globalism. I actually wrote a piece along these lines on my blog recently that you might be interested in, and if you wanted to talk about it sometime, I'd be perfectly happy.
I guess my question for you though, Larry,
Yeah.
is I would say in the same way, so that archetype that you've just articulated, the idealist, the utopian, the person who thinks that the world could be or as they're imagining it. Yeah, I think that is, let's put me in that character. That's, it's the job of our life's work to go out and build the world that we believe in and try to build the values into actuality that we believe in. But the thing I find a bit...
So let me stop you there. Right, that's interesting. You'd say that as if it were an obvious throwaway comment, but there's different ways of formulating it that are very importantly different. The way you formulated it is it's our life's work to build the world that we think should exist. I actually think it's our life's work to do something a little bit related to that, but not quite the same. I think that it is our life's work. It is the meaning of life to do as much as we can to improve the lives that we can impact. And that's really importantly different to trying to bring into being a system that a utopian system that we might not understand how to get to from here. You see what I'm saying?
I don't see why what I'm saying is different to what you're saying, which is that you like, for example, you have a vision for how knowledge should be accessible to everyone in a standardizable way, as best quality as possible, with as much awareness for the users as possible. Like, I see that as kind of, in your own expression, in the internet realm, in the digital realm, very similarly idealistic and painting of a picture and of a vision to...
Yeah, but I know how I'm going to get there. I actually have a plan. And I can explain every step along the way. And the parts that I don't have, I'm going to sit down and actually talk through in great detail before I do anything really rash.
Well, yeah, just to be clear, I'm not king of the world. So the next step isn't like release the hounds, open the borders, and really go crazy. That's not my...
I understand. That's cool. That's cool. I'm enjoying this, by the way. This is very interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's nice to like get some pushback on it as well. I think the way I operate, the way I make things in the world, is by having an appropriately sized sandpit for each stage of a project. So instead of, I can't do what you do, where maybe you can conceive of the whole plan and the whole system in your mind, and then you can actualize it. The way I learn is by doing. And so when I organize 8 of my smart friends and a few $100 of finance, and we start talking and start making agreements and start doing things on a small scale, that's how I learn. And then once I've done that, then I will know a lot more than I knew 2 months ago. And like I said, working on a, I do think that there's a lot to be said for working on a human by human basis as well, because when you get to know individuals and you know their stories, it does stop you from from blanketing this whole group are like that. And so learning about my friends and their stories and what they want from governments and governance services has helped shape a lot the early stages of my thinking around this. I guess my and I'd like to think that you would appreciate this, that whether this viewpoint and this direction of travel, let's say, ends up being of use to the world or not, the way I view it is it's an option. I'm trying to create a meaningful option that we can look at as a model and say, do we like it or don't we? Rather than just as a completely, on a scale from completely vague to something small scale to see, and then you have to extrapolate out to scale. I want to be part of a story that can say, I'm creating options for how we organize ourselves. And so that you can interrogate it and pull it apart, and we can make the idea stronger, or in the end decide to throw it away because it doesn't work. But I think the gap, I see a big enough gap in how we organize ourselves at the moment that it feels like it's worth putting the energy in that direction.
I think you're on to something in the following sense, that the fact that governments have basically tried to step in for the role of civil society, taking over the roles of civic organizations, the roles that they would have played in the past, or churches and so forth, creates for people like you and me, a real dissatisfaction. And we are similar in this respect, I think, right? That they're not doing everything that they could. And there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. And the only way that it really can get done, at least as far as we can see, is by pursuing certain kinds of plans to organize people voluntarily, to, but then, so your organization sounds really interesting. I'd like to hear more about it, but it does sound to me, I don't know how I would distinguish it from just a collectively managed nonprofit, international nonprofit.
Well,
very good. I mean,
I think that's fine in a way, because I don't need ultimately evidence of something beyond that is in its power, I guess, in its power to operate. So it's almost evident if it was to grow beyond that. At the moment, it doesn't even look like an international NGO, really. It looks like a small club for a few people, predominantly from Europe.
Okay.
So I would say, if you actually, I kind of agree with you that if we're saying, well, what is it? Then it's a club. It could become an international, it could be acting like an international NGO. I guess what I'm saying is I'm building it with the mindset of that kind of digital global state, even if it was only for 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people globally. It's essentially, you're trying to act to make those lives more secure and more able to flourish, as an additional service to the national services that they receive. In some cases, those national services are pretty damn good. In some cases, they're pretty damn poor, like the country's trying to kill them, or running them out of town. And so, like, for me, the rubber hits the road on that with, like, say, another friend that's living in London that is Kurdish, and he was born in an Iraqi refugee camp, went to Iran, Iraq. Neither of them ever gave him citizenship. He did end up smuggling himself to the UK because there was an opportunity to do it. He now, 10 years later, does have some kind of citizenship here. If he got in trouble, like, if he got in trouble with, I don't know, say the British government, I would want to go and support him, because there is no government, there is no nation anywhere that is going to have his back. And I could say, well, that's Iraq's fault, or that's Iran's fault for just not being good nation states. But I don't want to do that. He's my friend, and I have friends around the world, and I want to be able to provide some protection and services. Now, that you may say, and could be fair to say, that could still come under like a NGO kind of bucket. And
no, I think that I think there's a whole pattern of problems clearly here that need to be solved, and that need to be worked out. And this is with the State Department, or what do you call the State Department in the UK? The Home Ministry,
Yeah,
right?
I can't remember the right term.
Anyway,
Home Affairs.
And yeah, it's or is there a foreign ministry? Anyway, the point is that they need to get their act together, and until they do, then it just those people rely on their own resources and good friends like yourself, and ultimately, if there's going to be a bunch of people like that, not having all the rights that they should have, then I think it's a great thing for the resources of civil society to come in and try to make up for the failures of the systems.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, I mean, wouldn't your friend, if he wanted to go back to Iraq, would he be able to?
Truth is, I don't think he can't, because even recently when he was talking about now he's got his citizenship, wanting to meet his family, he would have to meet them outside. I think it was Turkey he was looking to meet them.
Weird.
And I don't understand all the details of it. I don't know all the details. All I know is he's a friend, and he's a guy, he's a good writer, he's a smart guy, and somebody you want in your community, somebody you want in your society. And he would be with his family if he could. He's been away from them for 10 years and pretty lonely in London. So it's challenging. But I think where we probably agree on this is that however big or small the gaps are of the existing system, and whether the gaps get bigger or not remains to be seen, there is a sense that we can have relationships like even this call right now across the Atlantic, having the most robust discussion I've had on this in months, and we're just doing it digitally. That we can have relationships with people around the world because the technology allows it. And on that basis, there is a layer of responsibility. Whether that layer ends up becoming something that we would think of as a global state, and
Mm-hmm.
whether that would be a good thing, also remains to be seen. But I think it's a layer that needs to be, I'm happy to be developing it. And I think it's of value, and we'll see how far that rabbit hole goes. I won't take your time with it now, but the thing I've been thinking a lot about in the last couple of weeks is essentially a cryptocurrency backed by trees. So we used to back currency by gold as a standard, but I think that we're in such desperate need of tree planting and reforestation. I think it'd be very interesting to have a crypto coin that can be infinitely replicable. You can make as much of it as you want, actually tied to something non-permanent and biological. I think it puts very interesting constraints on the economy of trees. If you create the currency around the life of a tree, I think I'm still unpacking and unfolding it, but it may be that becomes the flagship product, shall we say, from this beyond nation state worldview that I'm kind of holding. And that may be something that's more tangible and practical, that people can touch and feel and play with, that doesn't feel like an NGO or a UNICEF or something.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll have a part 2, Larry, once I get that together, and we can tear that one apart.
Okay, right. That sounds interesting. Okay.
Cool. Well, I have no idea. I cannot see how long we've been going for, but it feels like we've done a good one.
A little over 2 hours, I
No
think.
way.
Okay, almost 2 hours because we started at about 10. I think about 10:40. So
Wow. Okay, sorry, Larry. That's longer than we planned for. I appreciate
that's
your
all right.
time very much.
Yeah.
So the main links for people to go and check out are, let's see, it's knowledgestandards.org,
That's right.
larrysenner.org.
Yeah.
I'll put the links that you've mentioned that you've sent to me in below.
Mhm.
People can obviously go check out my links and give me new suggestions for other people they want to see on new agreements. I think the way you summarized your new agreement is really eloquently put, and I'll try and pull that out and show that somewhere so people can see it as a snapshot for what it is that you're building and what you want to see in society.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, and if you do have time to work on a video, I like I say, I will be in touch when the time comes. It might be soon.
well,
I've been
absolutely, Larry. I'm pleased to be of help. I like the mission that you've got. I think it's I think we will all be better off for it, and I can't wait to use it, frankly.
Yeah, me too. By the way, I found, if you look in the Zoom group chat, I found the links here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, of a couple of the essays that I mentioned there.
And you mentioned that there's one article you've been writing that you haven't published yet. Will you get that one over the line so we can read that too?
Eventually. Yeah, I really want to. It just keeps expanding, and it's also, I know it's going to be picked through with a fine-tooth comb by Wikipedians. So I want to make sure that I've got it 100% right before I get it out there.
Yeah, I get that.
We'll
I get
see.
that. Okay, so let's figure out this video thing, and then maybe, I don't know, in 3-6 months we could do another call, and you can we can talk about the currency and where you've got to on building the organization, and how we got on with making that video and stuff.
All right, sounds good.
Amazing.
Very good.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you soon, either on the YouTube channel or on with more of these new agreements. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. It's a real privilege to have that much of Larry's time. There's loads to chew on, loads to think about, lots of work to be done. I'll probably be helping him a bit with communicating his message for his new project. And yeah, stay tuned. We'll be back with you in the next few weeks with another episode of New Agreements.